Oh, it's awesome to be together. If we haven't yet met, my name is Joel, so it's just really a joy and a delight to able to be here, be together, especially on this day. Easter Sunday is a great day. If you're new to faith or still exploring faith, Easter Sunday is one of the main events. It's like the big deal of the big deal. This is like the big day. So this is kind of the cool thing. This and Christmas are the two power horses, if you like, in the Christian calendar. So this is the day that we celebrate Jesus rising from the dead. And I mean that in and of itself is a pretty outlandish thing to say, isn't it? Jesus rising from the dead is pretty crazy. And I don't know, most of us have had some experience or some idea of what Jesus is or who Jesus is. Maybe you grew up in a school that at least you had sort of religious assemblies occasionally, and you might have talked about what that meant, or maybe it was something that your parents did, or maybe your grandparents were really into church things, or maybe you've been to somebody's wedding and they sort of said a prayer over them and they did something that was sort of more churchy than maybe what your experience had been, or maybe you've been to a christening, or maybe even a funeral. You've been to something like that, and it was in an environment where people were talking about Jesus. And so for most of us, we have some idea of the person of Jesus or who Jesus is as a concept. And for some of us, maybe he's just another person in a long list of people, and maybe that's where it is for you. Or maybe it's something that's totally transformed your life. You've begun to find out that Jesus is really who he said he was. And wherever you are on your journey, your exploration of faith, I just want to say you are so welcome. We love to be a place where people can journey and explore faith. And that's really our heart. We want to be a place that we're going to say what we believe, but we're not going to shove it down your throats. We want you to have the space to be able to journey and explore faith. And this is just such an opportunity. It's just a cool thing. And what I wanted to do today is maybe a little bit different for an Easter story. We want to just sort of highlight the 4 days from Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. I want to highlight the 4 days and just take us kind of on a narrative, a bit of a journey, and looking into the stories. And the way we have these stories, this is totally cool. This is really, really important. The way we have the stories about what happened with the life of Jesus is because Jesus had real people, real people, real flesh, living people who hung out with him, and they spent time with him. And these people who hung out with him, there was this word they were called disciples, which just means follower. And these followers who hung out with Jesus, what they did was, as they used to tell people their stories like we're doing now. They they told people what their life was like and how it was and what they saw Jesus do, and they would tell people about these things. Now what happened is, like what happens to most of us, or will happen to all of us, is we will at some point get older and die. And before these followers of Jesus died, people would say to them, "Oh, Matthew, you have got to write down the stories. Write this down so we have a record. John, you've got to put it in, you've got to at least write it down so we have something to remember what happened." Okay, you guys were the first generation of people that were with Jesus, and when you go, we need to have these. So they wrote their memoirs, okay, these first-hand eyewitness accounts, their memoirs. And the thing is, when they sat there writing these books and writing down their memories, they had no idea they were still going to be read thousands of years later, because they didn't know they were writing a Bible. They weren't writing a Bible. What they were doing is writing down their first-hand eyewitness experiential account that they had with Jesus. They weren't writing a bestseller. Because the book that we call the Bible, which is 66 books put into one, it's like a mini library, actually, is really what it is. Those were all put together years later. They didn't have a Bible. That came after. That came after the event. And so that's how we have these first-hand eyewitness accounts of people that saw and heard and spent time with Jesus. These guys wrote this stuff down. Now, this is really cool as well. Maybe you already know this. If you're into literature and you study the history of literature, it's very uncommon for so many biographies to exist about a poor boy from nowhere. See, what happened was, in that time, the sort of books that were written were about amazing generals, commanders of armies, leaders of countries. You didn't write a biography about a nobody from a nowhere town, a poor place, a backwater environment, who living like a refugee, people that, why would you even write about them? So whether or not you believe in Jesus or not, it's worth exploring the concept that some people who were with him at the same time believed enough and about what was going on to write it down and to give their very lives for it. And so it's worth exploring. If you're exploring faith, it's interesting. It's interesting to study and look at the history of biographies. You can Google it when you get home. And so we want to sort of go through a journey, and we can use their firsthand eyewitness accounts that tell us what happened on their journey. And that first day, Thursday, I'm going to call Thursday the day of shame. Some people call it Maundy Thursday, but I want to give us a little bit of a different a name for it, the day of shame. And it's recorded by a guy named John. John was one of the ones that hung out with Jesus, one of his friends. He wrote about what took place in John chapter 13, They were together having what was called a Passover meal, which is it was a big festival for the Jewish people. They were all a group of Jews, and this is what they celebrated. So they were celebrating their Passover meal. Okay, and then during this meal, Jesus did something. Maybe you've heard this story. And what he does, he gets up and he takes off his outer robe and he gets a towel. It says he tied it around his waist, and then he got a basin and a jar of water, and he pours it out, and he starts to wash their feet. Okay. Now we read this story and we think, oh, isn't that such a kind little thing he's doing? He's being such a servant. What a servant leader to get down on his hands and knees and wash off those mucky, sandal, dusty, camel poo covered feet, right? I don't know, like what a nice guy to do this. We read it in that way. But actually culturally, there's something else going on. I mean, it's shocking. And it shocked the disciples. They didn't want any of it. And John writes that Peter said to him, he says, you will never wash my feet. You'll never do it. No, you cannot do it. And here's why it's really interesting. A friend of mine from Syria was explaining this to me. And you might know this anyway. In the Middle East, you don't show the bottom of your feet, do you? It's still, even today, it's still rude, culturally rude. And he said, you were not allowed to wash another person's feet. If you were a Jewish person, the only person that should wash your feet is yourself. Now, you could have a Jewish slave, and a Jewish slave in your own house could wash your own feet. They would never wash a guest's feet. That was not allowed. And because of the type of society it was, where men were dominant and women were subservient, if you were married, as a sign of respect, your wife could wash your feet. That was it. If you had a Gentile slave, now a Gentile is anybody who wasn't Jewish. Only a Gentile could wash your feet. Only if that Gentile was a slave. Because they are unclean themselves, so only somebody unclean can do something as unclean as washing your feet. So the last thing you would ever do as a Jewish person is wash another Jewish person's feet. It's not only shocking, it's actually shameful. It's degrading. It's dehumanizing. It's something that only an unclean slave would do for unclean things. Because you normally would only, and that's why Peter reacted in such a way. You will never wash my feet. You'll never, no, you cannot do this. This is never, ever going to happen. You could only, the thing was, and even in some of the other stories, it says, Jesus says, when we were here and you didn't give us water to wash our feet. He says in another place. The story wasn't, you didn't wash my feet. He says, I came here, you didn't greet me, you didn't welcome me, you didn't give us water to wash our feet. You did it yourself. You never got on your hands and knees. And especially if you were a rabbi, which was their leader, their teacher, they're the followers, and their rabbi was like the teacher. So here you are, someone that you respect, someone that you look up to, gets on his hands and knees, and he gets down, and he gets the water. And everything within you is like, you cannot do this because it's untouchable. You cannot do this. This is not what we do culturally. You cannot do this. You mustn't do this. Don't do this. You make yourself unclean. It's dirty. It's shameful. And on this day of shame, the one who loves so incredibly much will go to such incredible lengths that he's not even embarrassed or ashamed of your dirt. There's nothing you can do that he would not touch. There's nothing so unclean that he would not put his hands there. See, they thought to be clean, you had to avoid everything, almost like we have to have hand sanitizer. That's what the culture was like. The more clean you appeared, then the more righteous you were, and the more righteous you were, then the better you are, right? I mean, that's how religion works. If you can keep the rules the best, and if you keep the rules better than everybody else, then you're the best one in the room. And if you're the best in the room, then obviously you're like, the most holy. That's religion. And that's what they thought was the way to do things. This is what they'd grown up in. This is thousands of years of tradition and sin in their culture. And Jesus gets on his hands and knees, and he touches their dirt. And he's not just being a kind guy showing you how to be a servant leader. He's actually degrading himself. He's dehumanizing himself. He's throwing shame upon himself by putting himself in a position where he's not afraid or embarrassed to get his hands dirty. See, it's incredible the lengths that some people will go for love. There's no shame that can put him off. There's no filth that can put him off. And it's shocking. We miss the story because we don't understand the culture. And as I say, a friend of ours, he lives in London now, from Syria, was explaining some of the cultural backgrounds of that story. The lengths that people will go to show love. The next day is Friday. Friday is called Good Friday, which is kind of a funny name. Kind of calling Friday the day of death. You call it Good Friday, but it's weird you call it good when the best person in the world was treated the worst possible way. Good Friday is the day that we remember when Jesus was arrested and tortured and put to death. He was crucified. He was beaten. And one of his friends, who he had just washed the feet of, turned him in later on that night. One of the people that he had sort of dehumanized himself for, later on betrayed him. This guy's name is Judas. And even if you're not a follower of Jesus, you don't meet many people named Judas nowadays, do you? We just don't. You ever wonder why? Well, this is why. The guy dobbed his mate in, right? And on this day, he's arrested, tortured, beaten, and put to death. And crucifixion was one of the most cruel forms of punishment because it was a public form of punishment. It wasn't private. It wasn't like just tell them off. It wasn't like when we get a speeding ticket fine. You get it through the post. No one else even has to know about it. And you can fill out this form and you can tick the box to say, yes, it was my wife driving rather. No. You can fill out the form, and you can send it back. And no one even has to know about it really. It's like, you might pay a fine, whatever it is, and get some points on your license. But that crucifixion is public. Crucifixion is a punishment done on purpose to make a statement to other people. Because the Romans used it as a way to defer and deter other people from misbehaving. So it was a public spectacle of punishment. And that's what crucifixion was. That's what crucifixion is. And a lot of people were crucified by the Romans on purpose to do this. And they would leave people dying and suffering on this cross. And the best person ever was treated in the worst possible way. And the interesting thing is, if you think about it, if you were with someone else and they were your leader, most leaders expect you to die for them, right? A leader, let's say you're the commander, you're the leader of a group or something, or you're the leader of an army, you're the commander. The leader expects you to die for them, right? That's how you prove your devotion. You prove your devotion by dying for the cause, dying for said leader, and he or she stays safe in their tower or their office or wherever, right? Leaders want you to die for them. They want you to rush into battle for them. They want you to go to the lengths that they won't go, right? I mean, that's how it works, right? Because they're in charge. Yet this person, Jesus, did it the other way around. He ran into the battle. He went forward for others. Instead of expecting you to prove your devotion for him, he proved his devotion for you. Instead of expecting you to be like, hey, we really, we really follow you, Jesus. So he said, okay, die for me. No, he says, I love you and I'll die for you. He flips the whole script. He flips it all around. He puts his own life on the line. And it snuffs his life out. End of. Dead. Dead man, yeah. It was the death of hope. It was the death of anticipation, excitement. I mean, the followers were just, oh my gosh, Jesus died, and it was told not what they wanted to happen, not what they expected to happen. They thought he was going to be this great commander, this great general. And a few years later, after his death, this guy Paul writes some stuff. Now, Paul, if you've never heard about Paul, Paul is another really interesting character for you to look at, especially if you're exploring faith. So Paul, we know, is a real person who really, really lived and really, really visited lots of places. And you can go visit places that Paul has been, still today. You can visit prisons that he has been in Greece and Turkey. You can go to places in Malta where he had a shipwreck. You can go to the catacombs in Malta where he was. You can visit some of these places that he actually has been. And he was an educated man. And Paul had some experience with Jesus. The experience so much so that it totally changed his life, because up till that point, he thought it was just basically false. He thought it was a cult. He thought it was weird. He thought it was basically something that he should try to snuff out. And so Paul's an interesting person for you to look at, especially if you're exploring faith. And Paul writes this years later after himself having a conversion experience where he began to realize that Jesus was who he said he was. And Paul writes this. He said, God demonstrates his love for us, that when we were in the wrong, while we were still in the wrong, he died for us. We were in the wrong and he died for us. See, he was the one that went into battle for us. He was the one that initiated it for us. And expecting you to prove yourself first, he proved himself first. And expecting you to do something that was worthwhile first, he initiated it. He died for us. And it's so incredible the lengths that some people will go to show love. Oh, the lengths that he would go to show his love. And then the next day along, I know we're going really fast. We had Thursday, and we had Friday, and then there's Saturday. Saturday is traditionally known as Black Saturday or Holy Saturday. Maybe if you grew up in a religious environment, you might have heard it called that. I'm calling Saturday the day of darkness. The day in between. The day after Jesus died on the Friday, and then the day of darkness. And it's the day where we remember this in-between moment. There's a dark moment. The lifeless body lay in a tomb, dead, life snuffed out. It's the day when we traditionally remember that during that day of darkness, Jesus descended into the darkness. He went into the depths. He went into the hell of your lives, the hell of our lives. He went into the darkest of places. He descended into this place. And it's a place of shame, isn't it? It's a place of regret, a place of the darkness. It's also traditionally called the harrowing of hell, which is where in the in-between times after Jesus died, he descends into the depths, into the darkness. You think, well, why in the world is that important? Because first he gets his hands dirty. And then next he puts his life on the line. Then next he goes into the darkest of places. Because some of us can go to dark places. Some of us have been in dark places. Maybe in our minds, maybe in our emotions, maybe in our experiences, maybe in our traumas. Maybe we've experienced things that have taken us into dark places, places that we would never want to go back. Or maybe we're in that place even now. Maybe there's depths of hurt or depths of sorrow or depths of anxiety, depths of depression, depths of things that hold on to us, that hold such a sway over us that even when the sun is shining, it just still feels like it's a dark, heavy day. And the reason Black Saturday is important is because someone loved so much that they went into the darkest of places, the hell of all places, the grave of all places, the blackest night, the darkest place, the most grief-stricken, overwhelming, I don't even want to breathe, live sort of place. And into that place, the darkness in between death and life, he dives into that place because he is not afraid of the dark. And David was this guy. He was a king, and there's a story about him killing a giant. You might have heard about that story, David and this giant killer. And he writes this song, and it's in the Psalms, and it says, "Where can I go from your presence? I can't even get away from you. And if I'm on the heights, you're there. And if I descend to the depths, you're there. And the dark is not even dark to you," he writes. The dark is not even dark to you. And Saturday, the day of darkness, is important because we will go through some dark days if we haven't already. And people we love will go through some dark days. And Jesus goes into the darkest, deepest, bleakest places in our lives. It is so incredible the lengths that he goes to show his love. It's like he just loved us to death. He loved us to death. It cost him his life. He loved us to death. And then we come to Sunday. Sunday, the day that nobody expected. The day that was so unplanned and unanticipated. Nobody expected this day. You know, Jesus' friends and followers, they were not sitting outside the tomb with a countdown on their watch. You know, they were not sitting there being like, "Ooh, hey guys, only 2 more hours. Yeah, 2 more hours and it'll be time that the guy comes back, you know." You know, they were not like counting down. There was not some sort of like, you know, some Insta chat, some stuff going on. They were not like messaging one another saying, "Where are you? Get down here quick. You're going to miss the big reveal. He's coming. Quickly, get down here." You know, there was none of that going on. These guys were in hiding. They didn't know what was happening. Everything had fallen apart. Everything that they had hoped for and expected and planned for just fell apart. Everything is going crazy in their minds. They've seen their closest friend degrade himself by washing their feet, then sacrifice himself by dying on a cross. And now he's just in a tomb, gone. It's bleak and it's black. They're not expecting him to come back. They totally did not expect it. And on that first day, and in that story, we read that a number of the women went to the tomb. And the women went to the tomb, and it says that they had taken some spices with them. And you bring spices to anoint the body. And the reason you did that was culturally, which is still true nowadays, dead bodies begin to stink. Okay? It's true. Yeah? If you don't believe me, just put a piece of chicken outside on your worktop and leave it there for a couple of days, okay? Dead flesh ends up stinking. It's not nice, okay? And what they would do culturally is they'd bring the spices and because they didn't embalm them, they didn't mummify the bodies, they'd wrap the bodies and they would also put all these spices on them. So these women are bringing spices. Why are they bringing spices to anoint someone that they think is going to come back to life? No, they're bringing spices because he's dead. They did not expect him to come back. They expected a dead body, which is why they're bringing spices for a dead body. You know? What are the spices for otherwise, right? So it tells us that they go to this tomb and they bring these spices and and when they get there, they're greeted and oh my gosh, like the stone's been rolled away. What's going on? And then there's angels that saying he's not here anymore. He's risen from the dead. And they're like, okay, they've got no idea what is going on. And they run back to where all the others are so they can tell them. So they run back to tell them. And when they get there and they knock on the door, whatever it is, and they're probably in hysterics. They're just going loopy. And culturally, did you know that a woman wasn't even a valid witness? Wasn't even a valid witness in court, culturally? And you got a group of hysterical women who probably picked the wrong tomb. Right? What? That's what they're thinking. Okay? Let's be honest. These are human stories. They were not written to be polished and perfected. They were these guys' eyewitness accounts of what actually took place and what actually happened. They're not polished stories. Okay, so these women come who are like totally invalid in terms of their credibility legally, but they're the ones Jesus chose, which is totally cool, by the way. And they're the ones that go. They're the first witnesses. And they go and they tell the guys what's happening. And then Luke writes this down. He says this in Luke. He says, they didn't believe the women because it seemed like what they were saying, which is a bunch of nonsense. Man, they're like, I don't know, they stopped on the way. They're smoking something funny. Like, they're just like, yeah, man, you haven't slept in a few days. You're just so hysterical. You're so upset. These first-hand eyewitness accounts, the women come back, and they're like, yeah, whatever. They're just like hot air. They're speaking nonsense. Totally don't even believe them. They don't believe them. And then it says that Peter and John decided to run down to check out their story, right? Because they don't believe them. So they go to check out what the women said. And they get there, and Peter finds, and they see the tomb, they see the stone was rolled away, like the women said, and they're not sure what's going on. And Peter goes into the tomb, and then this is what it says about him. It says, he walked away wondering to himself, what in the world's going on? He didn't walk away saying, woohoo, the dude is back, get ready to party. He was like, he walks away thinking like, what in the world is going on? See, this is the day that nobody expected. And then the disciples later on, these followers of Jesus, they're all together and they're gathered together. They're probably talking about what's happened, what's going on. What do you think? Oh, man, the body's not there. They're saying this thing. I went there and then I saw it was empty, but I don't know what's going on. They have no idea what's going on. Yeah? So far, it's only just hysterical women who have any experience with somebody. Up till now, it's just an empty tomb, right? They're the only ones that have had a conversation with people. So they're in this room trying to figure out what's going on. You imagine it was probably just crazy, pretty manic, I don't know, yeah. It was pretty manic. It was pretty big. And then Jesus actually shows up. It says suddenly he shows up. Poof, And just imagine like poof. You're like, I don't know, biggest magic moment. I don't know. So suddenly Jesus appears among them and he says, peace be unto you. And why is the first thing he has to say peace? Because they are freaking out. Peace. It's okay. Chill out. It's cool. Peace. Peace. I come in peace. I come in peace. I come in peace. He didn't say, hey, it's me. Woo-hoo. He's like, whoa, 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 whoa. Peace. Peace. It's all right. It's all right. It's okay. It's okay. It's me. Peace be unto you. He greets them and this greeting of peace. Peace be unto you, which probably would be our same reaction if some dude just showed up and suddenly just poof appeared right here. It just kind of happened actually. If someone showed up we didn't expect, it's like doosh, just suddenly appears. Maybe we'd be freaking out, wouldn't we? And it's like, it's okay. Peace, peace, peace be unto you. Peace be unto you. And the story carries on. It says the disciples are shocked and frightened. They're shocked and frightened. They're not like on their knees worshiping and dancing and celebrating and like pulling the party poppers. They're shocked and frightened, thinking that they've seen a ghost. Because this is the day that nobody expected. Even his closest friends and followers didn't even believe it. They think that they're seeing a ghost. Why? Because dead people stay dead. It's a fact of life. It carries on, and Jesus says to them, he says, Why are you afraid and full of doubt? Look at my hands and my feet. It really is me. It really is me. It's okay. Go on, touch me. Touch me and see. Go on, it's okay. Touch me and see. A ghost doesn't have flesh and bones. I'm not a ghost. You can really feel, it's not some sort of hysterical vision that you're having, some apparition. I'm a real live, real person. It says later on he ate with them and other things like that, again, just to prove that he was there in the flesh. And do you know what their reaction is? Probably the same as any normal, logical human being's reaction. Their reaction is recovering from shock and joy. They still did not believe it. They still did not believe it. I mean, I don't know what it takes for you to believe in Jesus, but if Jesus all of a sudden showed up in the flesh, real live, real like human flesh person, and said to you, that's okay, shake my hand. Hey, let's have a meal together. Sat down and got a coffee and some biscuits. Oh, these are nice. Never had these when I was younger, I don't know. Wouldn't you think for you that would be enough? Right? I mean, we have to believe in Jesus, and we don't get to see him in the flesh. We don't get to and these guys, these men and women hung out with him for years, and here he is in the flesh once again, and he's trying to reassure them. It's the same voice, it's the same person, it's the same body, he's eating with them, he's speaking with them, and he's like, it's me, it's really me, it's really, really me, and still reeling from shock. They don't believe it. They don't believe it. This is why I told you these are like eyewitness, first-hand accounts. People writing what really happened, what really their experiences were like. And the thing they don't believe is because they saw him put to death. They saw him die. Dead people stay dead. This is the day that nobody expected. Dead people stay dead. You're not supposed to get back up. They still did not believe it. He speaks with them. He spends time with them. Eventually they do believe that it really is Jesus come back from the dead. But it took a while. And sometimes it takes a while for us to journey into faith and to take those steps and those leaps. And for some of us, even today and in our society nowadays, we take bigger leaps because we don't get to sit down with Jesus. We don't get to have a conversation with them. We just get to read the experiences and the evidences from people who are with him. So we have a different journey, if you like. But eventually, they believed in it. It's incredible the lengths that someone would go to show his love. In spite of not believing, in spite of doubting, in spite of discounting the witness, in spite of writing them off, he just kept loving and kept saying, no, it really is me. It really is me. It's incredible the lengths he goes to show his love, isn't it? And this event became the message that they told everybody. This one event, the resurrection, became the thing that the rest of it was all built on. If you read the rest of their letters, the rest of their journeys, everything from that point on, it all comes back down to the death and resurrection of Jesus. That's the one thing. They didn't write letters trying to prove creation happened in 7 days. They didn't try to write stuff about how science and faith work together. They didn't try to write about how, Noah built a boat. Those weren't the things that were the foundation for their faith. The foundation for their faith was one event, and one event only, the death and resurrection of Jesus. This is the thing that changed everything for them, because they'd seen him die, and they'd seen him come back to life. That changed everything for them. Everything. This individual who they saw on Thursday take all the shame and degrade himself, and then on Friday take all the pain and all the punishment, and then on Saturday descend into the darkest of places, and then on Sunday come back to life. That changed their life. And that can change our lives as well. That same story works for us. The same one who loved to death loved to life. He loved to death, and he loved to life. Thursday reminds us that there's nothing we can do that will put Jesus off from loving you. I don't know what you've done in your life. Maybe you've done some crazy stuff. Maybe you've not done very many crazy things. I don't know. Thursday reminds us that there's nothing you can do that will put Jesus off. It's impossible. There's nothing you can do that will put him off. Nothing. Friday reminds us that he paid the price. He paid the price for us. You didn't have to prove yourself first. He proved himself first. He did nothing wrong, yet he proved himself. You didn't have to prove your devotion. He proved his. There's no price too high that he hasn't already paid. And Saturday, Jesus is the one who descends into our darkness. There's no place you can go that he cannot find you or reach you or love you. There's no place so dark, so hidden, so written off, so hidden away that he cannot go. And Sunday, Easter Sunday, reminds us that he loves us to life. To life. He loves us to life. In spite of everything that we might have done, in spite of any of the things that we're afraid or ashamed of things that we should be punished for, or things that are dark and hidden. Sunday reminds us that in spite of all of those things, he loves us to life. John wrote as well. He wrote that Jesus came to earth to give life, and life to the full. John 10:10, he recorded Jesus teaching, and Jesus said, I have come that you might have life and live it to the full. Jesus loves us to life. And as we close and wrap up, I want to read one more verse. And this was in Ephesians. And this guy, Paul, who I said earlier was a Jesus hater, became a Jesus follower. He was someone who tried to snuff out the church and get rid of it and destroy it. And he killed early followers of Jesus. And yet he had this experience with Jesus which totally changed his life. And he writes this. He wrote it to his group in Ephesus, which is a real place, and you can really visit it. You can go to Ephesus today. Well, not today. It's probably a bit late. You might catch a flight from Luton this evening. I don't know. You can visit Ephesus this year. You can go there. How about that? You can go to Ephesus. You can go to this. This is a real place. So Paul's writing to a Christian community, a gathering of Jesus followers in Ephesus. And this is what he writes to them. He's trying to describe this love of Jesus that we've just been trying to wrestle with. He says, I pray that you will know. I pray that you will know. Everybody here this morning, everybody online, everybody will know. I pray that you will know, that you'll come to understand how long. You know, you ever seen a long road? You ever been on one of those roads that's so straight you can't see the end of it? We don't have many of those in England. Out in Oklahoma, places like that, you know, driving, and it's just like it goes on for miles and miles. How long? You know, it's like standing on the edge of the ocean. How long? Can you see the end of the ocean? Can you see the end? How long? He said, I just pray you could know how long. How wide? You ever stood somewhere and you've seen a vista, and it's so it just fills all of your eyesight, all your peripheral vision. It's just this massive thing. It's like the sky. Show me where the end of the sky is. How wide? How wide? I want you to know how long and how wide. And he's like, how high and how deep. Paul, he's just trying to describe it. He's like, I just pray, this is what I want you to know more than anything. I want you to know how long and wide and high and deep. I want you to understand how incredible the love of Jesus is. And not only to know it, I want you to experience it. I want you to experience it. I want this to be something that affects your life, because when you are loved like that, it changes you. Because you're loved to life. It changes you. I want you to experience this love. It's so amazing. And then he just writes, it's so great. It's so incredible. Actually, you'll never understand it. Isn't that funny? I just love that verse. I just pray. I really pray that you, and it's like an unanswered prayer. I pray that you'll just grasp how huge the love of God is, even though I know it's an impossible prayer, because you can never, ever, ever understand how long and how wide and how high and how deep his love is for you. You can't actually understand it. It's too much for our comprehension. We're stuck in our dirty, filthy feet shame. We're stuck in feeling we have to be punished and pay the price. We're stuck in dark places, and we can't fully understand that the love of God is bigger than all of those things, no matter where you have been or what you have done. We get stuck in these things, and yet I just hope and I pray and I long that you will discover how long and how wide and how high and how deep the Father's love is for you and your loved ones. Maybe your children, maybe your parents, maybe your siblings, maybe those that are in your heart that you think, oh, I really, really wish that they could discover how much Jesus loves them. More than anything, I just wish they could do it. And maybe that's your prayer today, that you pray that they will experience this love, that just like Paul is saying, I really pray that you will experience this. Maybe that's your prayer for others. I just pray, I hope they can discover it. As we come to land and wrap up this morning, this Easter Sunday where we celebrate and remember all of these things, I just want to invite you, because that's all Jesus ever did, was invite people. He just invited you. He didn't force anybody. He didn't beat anybody up. He didn't treat you like you were stupid or make you feel like a failure. He just invited you. He just invites. He says, come to me. Come to me. Come to me. You're weary, you're worn out, you're tired. Come to me. He says, whoever believes, everyone, whoever believes in me can have everlasting life. He just invites. And so I want to invite you today. I just invite you to say, yeah, I'd love to know more about Jesus. I'd love to know more about this kind of love. I'd love to know about a love that loves to death and loves to life. I'd love to know a bit more about that kind of love. I'd love to know more about this person who just totally changed the world. I'd invite you to discover more about who Jesus is. Today could be your day that you make a decision to say, yes, I want to be a follower of Jesus. And maybe not. Maybe you're still journeying, and that's okay. We'd love to journey with you. But what we're going to do in just a moment, we're going to all put our heads down, and then I'm going to ask you, if you want to, if you feel like, hey, you know what, this is a thing, I want to respond. I want to say, yes, I want to give my life to Jesus. In a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand up, just so you can let us know that we can pray with you and chat with you afterwards, okay? No pressure. It's just an invitation. So if we put our heads down and I'm just going to ask you, if today is the day that you think, you know what, I'm ready to make a decision and say, count me in. Yes, I want to know more about this love of Jesus. Then I just ask you to raise your hand if you want to say, yes, I want to become a follower of Jesus. Thank you, Father. And what I want to do now is just pray for you while we still have our heads down. Thank you, Jesus. God, I just pray for every single person here that there's just such a gift. Thank you that they are a gift from you. And God, I ask that through this season we could be reminded again of your incredible love. We're so grateful for what you've done for us. Thank you that there's no shame that holds us back, no punishment, no price we have to pay, no dark place that you won't descend. Thank you, God, that you've reached into all of those places and you love us to life. I pray your blessing over everyone here this morning, that they would just know how long and wide in how high and how deep your love is. And that they wouldn't just know it as a concept or an idea, but they would actually experience it. Experience it, God. Thank you so much for who you are. In your name we pray. Amen. Have an amazing rest of the week, whatever you've got going on. It's so cool to be together. If you have any questions about anything, we'd absolutely love to chat with you. If you got time, grab some more biscuits and coffee and whatnot. If you've got children or teenagers, they are across the road. We'll just have to collect them as well. But have an amazing week and happy Easter.
Jesus, the name above every other name. Jesus, the only